President Muhammadu Buhari this morning gave a State of the Nation address, directing the Central Bank of Nigeria to allow only the old 200 Naira notes to remain legal tender until April 10, 2023, in order to improve currency circulation in the country and ease pains experienced by Nigerians due to the decision to retire some denominations of the old banknotes after a currency redesign project. It will be recalled that the Supreme Court yesterday adjourned the suit filed by state governments to challenge the Naira redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The Supreme Court adjourned the case till Wednesday, February 22, for a hearing of the consolidated suits by 9 states. Joining us now on the show to analyze the President's address on the Naira notes circulation is Professor Ndubisi Nwokoma, a professor of financial economics and director of the Center for Economic Policy Analysis at the University of Lagos. Good morning, Prof, and thank you very much for joining us on the morning show. Well, I'm sure like the rest of us...
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm sure like, we did, and many Nigerians did, you listened to the President this morning on the issue of the old Naira notes and the decision to extend the validity of the old 200 Naira notes to circulate side by side the new notes till April 10. And the President also saying that people should take advantage of the guidelines that have been offered by the CBN for them to be able to still return the old 500 Naira and 1,000 Naira notes. What's your assessment of the President's intervention at this critical time?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's a good intervention from what has been happening recently in the economy and even in our politics. And I think we can look at the issue from 3 different perspectives. We can look at the economic side, issues of monetary policy. We can look at it from the legal side, or look at it from the political side. So there is politics, there's economics, and there's the law on this issue of the new Naira notes. And I think if you take a look at the address by the President, he was able to point out 3 critical areas, or the focus of his address. Number 1 is the sustenance of the fight against corruption. That is one area. And the second area is to address the issue of economic downturn. And then thirdly, the issue of terrorism, to sustain the gains made in terrorism. So if you take a look at the speech from those 3 perspectives, I think that speech has some very strong merit, particularly since we are heading into for a general election. In the next less than 2 weeks, we are going to have the election for the office of the president. And I think we need to take a look at the issue from a very balanced perspective. And then also take into account this policy was first announced on October 26th of last year. It was over 3 months. And this last-minute rush, or this last-minute, this brouhaha, this back and forth, it's a battle for the soul of Nigeria, basically. That is the way I look at it. It's a battle for the soul of Nigeria. And there are those for and those against. And the argument that the ordinary man will suffer, from my view, it's largely pedestrian. Yes, people are suffering, and people cannot get the new Naira notes. But we need to find out why is that the case. Why are they not available? We also need to take into account the assertions by the central bank governor that there are some challenges in waylaying the new notes, so to make them scarce artificially, such that the problem can be magnified beyond what it actually is, in order to drive another agenda, so that the government can do a kind of reversal on the policy of having the new Naira notes. So, and we've had some media coverage of some of these notes being stashed away in some bank branches across the country. So and the back and forth between the commercial banks and the central bank. So the central bank said, we have given out this money, it's available. And the commercial bank said, we don't have them. Somebody is not saying the truth. And there is this back and forth. And then that some people have bought over or bought or cornered the new notes is an allegation made by the CBN. So there are so many things. So I think, in my own opinion, the address by the president is actually needed at this point in time. People can look at it from the legal side that the Supreme Court had made some pronouncement on this, and the case is still to be heard even next week. But the fact is that the old notes will still be in circulation, but not all. And based on some other information which may be at the disposal of the central bank and the presidency about some notes of some denominations being stashed away. And from the address, you find that we have about 3.2 or 3 point something trillion as the size of the currency we have circulated. And only about 2.7 trillion are outside the banking system. So which means money is being stashed outside the banking system. A lot of money, more than half of the currency in circulation is outside the banking system. So if you have that, it will be difficult for CBN to properly manage monetary policy. Monetary policy actually is the primary purpose of monetary policy is to enhance price stability. So when you have about 2.7 trillion of your currency in circulation outside your control, and they are likely stashed away somewhere by some people, and people are suspecting that it's by politicians, and we have the election coming up. So I think any sensible government should be able to take a look at that and see what can be done to address the issue. Why the case is before the central bank, the Supreme Court to address, and of course the address says 60-day window for you to get this issue addressed. And after the election, then we can look at it more holistically. But I think, in my opinion, the address is a good one.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Now, one of the things that the president said during his address was highlighting the gains of the policy since it was introduced, one of which is inflation rate. Now, before the figures released yesterday, the inflation rate, we'd had some gains in the inflation rate. However, we've seen it surge to an all-time, a recent high of 21.82%. I'd like you to share in terms of the impact of the policy on certain economic parameters and factors and the timeline to begin to see these gains.
Yes, monetary policy actually thrives when you are able to control the level of money supply in the economy. Because there are different viewpoints on what is causing inflation. And one is the monetary, the monetary theory perspective, that money supply is very critical. Like people say, the quantity theory of money, that if you have much money in circulation, it affects the level of prices. So if we'll see it from that perspective, that money in circulation is not the central bank, their primary function is to manage monetary policy critically. Like I said earlier, the primary function of monetary policy is price stability. But when that instrument that you need to manage prices is outside your control, and it is not going back to the banking system. We have the money outside the banks. So the level of inflation we have now is actually not as expected. And it can be better if central bank could have a greater control of the level of money in circulation. If they don't, they will just be helpless. What they've been doing in the past few months, what they've been doing is jacking up the monetary policy rate. That's what they've been doing. They're always jacking it up to make credit more expensive, to make it difficult to have a kind of a credit squeeze in the economy, hoping that you'll be able to address the issue of inflation. But you don't have money supply under your control. A lot of the money circulation is outside your control. So, and many of these things, it is suspected. I don't have all that many of these monies being stacked away, and monies are proceeds from terrorism. They are proceeds from corruption, money laundering. There are financial flows that are illicit across the country. So, and some people stacked away money in bullion vans or in places preparing for election. And we know the role of money in politics in Nigeria. So if the Buhari administration, despite all people have blamed it for, can get it right at this time around, being able to make sure that the influence of money in politics is actually reduced. It cannot be completely wiped away. If it's reduced significantly, by trying to manage this redesign such that they can be able to bring down the level of inflation, and they make sure that they can now begin to juggle with the monetary policy, the parameters of the macroeconomy. That, in my view, inflation definitely will come down. We know there are other factors that are causing inflation. There's the cost push factor, cost of production, infrastructure is not available, security and all that. But we also need to look at the money supply implication for inflation. And I think, in my view, the policy to allow 200 naira to circulate, it will address some of the problems that are encountered by the ordinary Nigerian, being able to enter to pay for your bus, to be able to buy tomato in the market, to be able to buy yam and all that. If you have that could address those issues. It's a temporary solution. Because the bulk of the money, oftentimes, are in 1,500 naira denomination. And that is where these people use for illicit financial flow. All these people that are captured in schools, in parts of the north, where people pay 100 million, 250 million to get your ward or your children released. So these monies are stashed away. So if you render those monies useless, they are not completely useless because you can still redeem them, but you need to now tell us how you got that money. If you have billions, after the expiration, you find that you need to go to CBN to make sure that we know that the money belongs to you. So I think, in my view, it helps to fight inflation.
Okay, Prof. Real quickly, I'd just like to also, want you to say one or two things, as regards inflationary push and this policy, because we saw inflation trended downwards, but now it's also gone up again, which a lot of people are saying because of the ancillary cost push as regards fuel scarcity, food prices, all precipitated around this election period. But I also want to ask you about, because Nigeria's case is a unique case. In the case of India, there was still some circulation of this black money. But in Nigeria's case, the circulation is just limited to a certain class of people. Bandits, terrorists, politicians. So there's no circulation even in the formal system for you to be able to say, okay, there's an increased liquidity even in the formal system and all of that. It's still just held up money, at some point even money that is beginning to rotten at the expense of the people. And these monies are not brought into the financial system so that people can even take them as loans. So can you talk me through the peculiarity of this our system in the first place? Because it's just stored cash, it's released during election, causes a surge in inflation, and it's stored again.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. In trying to compare ourselves with other countries like India, in my view, at least at this point in time, it's like trying to compare apples with oranges. They are fruits, but they are different in some respect. At this peculiar period in our nation, a national life, when we have the election coming up in less than 2 weeks, I think we need to think of something that is quite unique. In ordinary times, we can say, let these currencies, let these notes circulate side by side until we'll be able to get the notes available for economic transactions. But when we have this confirmed occurrences across the various elections at the state levels, that vote buying is a very, very critical factor in determining who wins or who does not win elections. I think that's an issue. So inflation definitely will be affected. Central bank still has its job cut out for it. This one alone cannot be the medicine that cures all their problems. They need to take a look at how to get all the monies back into the banking system. The issue of financial inclusion. And I think what we are also gaining, which people are not even bringing up, is the need that over this period that people are suffering, there has been an increase in cashless transactions. Yes. Even the market woman who is selling pepper, they now say do transfer. Somebody told me that even in Edo State, where they had the right of the people, even the meat seller, they all have, some of them have POS. Some of them say, you want to buy meat in the market, you do transfer. So now we are gaining. Government have been trying to get this issue of people paying cashless over time. It is actually, people are now transacting. I can buy anything now. I can transact. Only a few things you want to manage how much you spend your cash. So we have, over this period, this policy or this brouhaha has been able to help us to enhance the push for having a cashless economy. And I think it's something we need to also acknowledge. In my view, inflation will be addressed, but this particular medicine will not cure all the problems of central bank. But in my view, it's bringing that 200 naira. There's a legal side, like I said, which also the cost can actually look at. But as an economist and as somebody who cares about our political economy, about the oncoming politics, I think this particular policy will assist us to, one, make sure that money that has started away will be useless to those who, and if you bring the money to central bank later, you tell us how you got the money, and that will also bring in EFCC and other agencies of government. And secondly, those who are at the lower rungs of society can be able to transact. They can enter buses, buy pepper, buy yam, buy tomatoes, when you have the 200 naira made available. And then the cost can determine what happens later. But let us keep that on until after the elections, and let us make sure we can have some kind of confidence that this election was actually largely free and fair.
All right, thank you so much for your time.